Ouachita One Table. Ouachita One Table podcast is a deeper discussion of issues facing our business communities. Over this series, we'll invite community leaders in businesses, the arts, nonprofits, culture, and government as we discuss the issues that strike at the heart of the Chamber's mission for the greater good of our parish. Topics such as workforce development, education, quality of life, economic development, and more. Ouachita One Table. This podcast is a partnership project of the Monroe and West Monroe, West Ouachita Chambers of Commerce and was produced by Godly Works Productions in the Louisiana Catalyst Podcast Studios at the Benoit Community Center. Now, here are your hosts, Roy Heatherly and Christopher Kelly.
Hey everybody, it's Ouachita One Table, a community partnership between the West Monroe, West Ouachita, and Monroe Chambers of Commerce. I'm Chris Kelly, joined as always with my awesome friend,
Roy Heatherly with the Monroe Chamber. How you doing, Chris?
I'm great, and we have a fantastic guest as always, Jeremy Tinnerello with Glenwood Regional Medical Center.
Thank you for having me.
No,
well,
it's our
we are
privilege.
so glad you're here. You are active on both sides of the river. I think you serve on both our boards. We appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And we were talking right before we started, and we wanted to find out, and you can tell our listeners and viewers how you got started.
Literally from day one.
Yeah, literally from day one.
Well, literally day one, started at Glenwood, we'll just say almost 50 years ago.
Round down.
On the day I was born, actually born at Glenwood Regional, and grew up in the city of West Monroe. I left for college and came back in 1992-93. I actually took a job in the emergency room at Glenwood as an orderly. At the time, thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and me and my cousin were taking pre-law courses at Northeast Louisiana University at the time. And honestly, it was just a few months into working there, in the emergency room, and seeing healthcare firsthand, and watching how that team of nurses, doctors, everybody, the orderlies, the secretaries, lab, everyone worked together as a solid team and unit when it was most needed. I actually had a personal friend who had come in a bad car wreck, a very traumatic wreck, and that was really the moment. I watched how everyone worked on him, saved him. He had a productive life, and following that, and the next semester, I went and changed my major to nursing and said that's what I wanted to do.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah, so so from Glenwood, I worked as a nurse there in the emergency room until about 2007, 2008. I did some disaster work during Hurricane Katrina and some other things for the hospital during that time. And in 2007, the hospital was acquired by IASIS Healthcare, and we became part of a national network. And so, over the next following years, did some work in director positions, worked as the chief nursing officer, chief operating officer, did some regional work, and had a few options to move to our corporate office in Nashville, but West Monroe was always home. So my children were here, loved the place, and decided that this is where I wanted to stay. So
we're proud that
Yeah,
here we are 30 years later.
And it's a blessing for us. But how many people in your position can say they were born in the institution that they're leading?
I've not met another one. There may be a couple out there, but it's definitely been a fun ride so far.
But what a great story. But you passionately love the area. You had chances to leave, but you stayed. Why? Tell me why this is home. Why it makes it so good?
There's just a unique culture. I've had the opportunity in our company to travel and work, and right now we have close to 40 hospitals in the United States, and I've been in half of those facilities through the years, and all great facilities, delivering great care. There is something different about our hospital in West Monroe that I think derives from the culture of the community. It is a family atmosphere. It is people that come together during the biggest time of need. It's a culture you don't want to leave. We've seen it in the community during times of disaster. We saw it during the hurricane, saw it during the floods a few years ago. And we'll likely talk about COVID at some point today. But, I also work on the state board for Louisiana Hospital Association and represent all of Northeast Louisiana. And oftentimes I felt like I was the only person at the table that was not explaining having issues with staff leaving and not working together to get through the pandemic. It never was a problem for us. And I think that our staff, again, it's that culture. And, it's just something you don't want to leave. It's where I wanted to raise my kids, where I have, both of my children. One's graduate from ULM, one's graduate from Louisiana Tech. Got my first grandbaby. Thank you. Thank you. That will be 8 months old in a few days. And, this is where not only me, but my children want to raise their kids as well.
So you just said 40 hospitals. Let's pause, though, and brag on this hospital for a second. You gave us some cool numbers the other day.
Yeah, so Glenwood Hospital, we are definitely one of the leaders in our company. We've had a lot of success, a lot of growth over the past few years. We're in a unique position in Northeast Louisiana, Monroe and West Monroe being the kind of the hub for 16 parishes around us. Us and St. Francis Medical as well, we both serve as tertiary hospitals for all of those facilities. So when they have those patients that are more complex and complicated, those patients gravitate and transfer into our facilities. With the pandemic and what's happened over the past couple of years and our success in recruitment and our success in retaining staff has allowed us to stay not only busy and consistent throughout the pandemic, we've actually been able to expand some things. And so in the past couple of years, we brought what was first to the area for structural heart, bringing what we call TAVR procedures. Lets us do aortic valve replacement through the groin, actually go home the same day. And I think back to
surreal.
I know. I think back to when I first started, and that was an open heart procedure, and you're in the hospital for 7-10 days at least.
Clutching a pillow the whole time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so now you literally come in that morning and go home that day. It's incredible. We're doing robotic spine surgery, first in the region to do that. And we're right now doing upwards to 35, 36 cases a month right now. So it's been very, very busy.
That's great.
Yeah, it's allowed us not only to hold on to that health care and provide the health care that's needed for Monroe, West Monroe, and this region here. We actually now have patients that are coming from Mississippi, South Arkansas that will come in for these
ramping
procedures.
up the reputation, and patient outcomes are going up as a result.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
I want to ask you. I want to go back to something you said because it intrigued me. But you said that when you were talking about you didn't want to leave, that your culture reflects the community. And how do you? I thought that was such a great statement because it speaks not only to the hospital but it speaks to the community too. How do you build that? How did you all? Because you've been there now and you've seen it grow. How did that happen?
Well. Communication is key to everything. It doesn't matter if you're speaking about business, if you're speaking about city government, if you're speaking about family. It's communication.
Right.
And that, I think that's something that maybe I've been able to bring to the table because, Monday we had our new orientation group of new hires that came in, and I come in and I speak to the group about the hospital and welcome everybody on board. And I always go around the room and ask everybody where they work. And 60-70% of the time I was like, yeah, I did that job. so you can familiarize yourself with their challenges and their position. And so, the healthcare changes, it will have changed by the time I leave here from this meeting. Right. It's just constantly evolving. And the only way that you can keep your staff and everyone tied in together is communication. So we have a very open door policy to how we lead inside that hospital. I am Jeremy to every person in that building. I'm not Mr. Tinnerello, the CEO. I don't know if I've ever been called that, but it's very open door. Everyone in the building knows no appointment needed. You have an issue, you come to us, come down to administration, walk through the doors. But we actually bring ourselves to them. We round on those floors every single day. We hold what we call daily huddles, and we do little team meetings on every unit every single day, and just transparency. Even during the challenging times during the pandemic, we were very upfront with how we did things, and you create a culture where everyone feels like they're an equal part, and everyone has a say, and you stop and you listen to what everyone might want to suggest, because that's oftentimes where the greatest ideas will come from. For example, during the pandemic, one of the biggest challenges we had up front that we had never faced was having the building locked down, more or less. No visitation, some of the sickest people in my entire career I'd ever seen, and the biggest thing you need at bedside is family. You need that outside support, and we could not bring those people in. Could not figure out what we were going to do. And it was a housekeeper, and it was one of our nurses in the ICU that came up with an idea and would call the families and say, what is your mother or your father's favorite color? It's yellow. Well, then we would make large yellow hearts, and we would stick them on the windows outside and tell the families, you can be close to her right here. And we literally cut shrubs back in our flower beds so people could get up to the building. They couldn't get inside, but they knew that's where mom's at, that's where grandma's at, that's where grandpa's at. And it was little ideas like that. And it was a lot of those little things that, again, speak to the culture. And, it's like I said, just making sure you're listening to everybody and giving everybody a chance.
So you mentioned COVID, so let's address COVID. Trying times like no other.
Yes, it was. Most people in my seat are sick and tired of talking about COVID,
Sure.
And at the same time want to speak to it so everybody understands.
Right.
We're all ready for it to go away.
And probably not.
Right.
And probably not. It's just here.
Exactly. And, it was a lot of challenges at first.
Sure.
As I mentioned earlier, we were a tertiary hospital. So when we were looking at numbers in Northeast Louisiana, one thing we were trying to make people understand is they would say there's, so many hundred people hospitalized with it in Northeast Louisiana.
Yeah.
Mainly in 2 hospitals.
Yeah.
So
you're right.
So
right.
we were full,
Yeah.
and literally closed down several units and dedicated them to COVID, and slowly worked our way through that, and got to the point where we're at now. The teamwork thing, and I think that's indicative of healthcare and what we were talking about
Sure.
earlier in communication. Everyone comes together when they need to,
Mm-hmm.
and from the very first weeks, we created some teams meetings. We had done something we had never done. Hospitals, we always work with each other.
Sure.
But we're also highly competitive.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not common for us to share strategies and so forth, but in times like this, it's exactly what we did. So we would have teams meetings every day, where we would invite ICU physicians and infectious disease physicians from each of our hospitals, and we would get on for 2 hours, and we would talk about the last 24. And we would say, here's what we saw, here's what we tried, here's what seems to be working. And we were trying some pretty wild things. Glenwood was the first hospital in Louisiana to actually give convalescent plasma, which all came just through this conversation where we all took turns. You're going to try this today, we're going to try this. And had great success with it, and we're able to send that off to other hospitals and develop protocols and
Sure.
and work through all that. But here we are today. We're still seeing a lot. Thankfully, the severity of the illness has lessened to a bad flu for the most part. Immunization's a hot topic, but we do still see that the majority of the people who are hospitalized are non-vaccinated. Doesn't mean you can't catch it. We know that now. But again, we're getting there. I think towards hopefully towards a normalcy, whatever the new normalcy is.
You spoke about corporate culture, and I wondered during that whole time, so much intensity in that environment. Did you all have a strategy for dealing with burnout? Did you have a strategy for dealing with? I mean, that's probably an emotional burden.
It is, and a lot of it we developed it as we went. None of us knew how long it would last.
Sure.
And so most of us were hoping, because those that had done it long enough had been through previous scares with H1N1 and other things. And it's like, it's 90 days, and then we forget about it. Well, that didn't happen. Right. And so you find, and this may be something that was a greater challenge for us, and I think that goes back to the culture we spoke about in the hospital. Where I would hear other hospitals and other facilities speak to the challenge of keeping nurses in those units, right. I couldn't get them out. Once they got in there, they more or less locked down, and that's where they wanted to be. And they wanted to be with those patients. They had found ways to communicate with family members, and they didn't want to let that go. So it was a lot of working with the staff.
That is, to me, dedication. Yeah, that is a testament. That is such a great thing that you just said to your employees, those that wanted to stay on the front lines of that. That is amazing.
They were. I couldn't be more proud. And I've often said when I've had this conversation, I cannot put it into words what we saw and the dedication we saw with the people that we had. I never had one complaint. I never had really anyone speak of burnout. It was what we saw from our position as we were upstairs rounding, because I still rounded in those COVID units. My scrubs still fit. They were a little tighter than they were, but still rounding those units and make sure they had what they needed. We even developed towards when things started going down, and then we saw another uptick with Omicron variant. We actually developed support groups internally with our nurses, and probably the biggest support we got was the community again. Yeah. It was leaders in the community, churches. It was industry and business that would bring us supplies and food and just a tremendous amount of support.
Do you think Glenwood's resonance in the community is because of the way it started? Like people feel a sense of ownership?
Maybe so. And the hospital was open in '64, and it taxpayers here in the parish on that side or who paid those taxes to get that hospital built. And I have heard many a patient say, "This is my hospital." Yeah, and when they say "my," it's my hospital. Yeah. And I think all of us feel that. Yeah. But for sure, I think that's we're in a very unique spot.
So you spoke about staff. Let's pivot away from COVID for a second. Just not that it's going away, but pivot away. What's next? When you look at recruiting, we talk about a nursing shortage. We talk about a lot of things. What's next in the strategy for Glenwood to maintain this high level of standard?
It goes back to what I said earlier. It's trying to maintain and sustain that culture that we've built. The nursing shortage is at an all-time high. It shows no signs of getting any better. Sure. When the pandemic started, there were just over 2,000 RN vacancies in the state of Louisiana. That number right now is just under 10,000.
So pause for just a second. Because people are retiring or graduation rates do not keep up with the demand of new positions?
Healthcare has changed so much. You had a retirement of a lot of older nurses. Sure. There was statewide a significant amount of burnout from the pandemic.
I would think so.
There are so many more options for nurses now versus 20 years ago.
Sure.
Nurse practitioner, nurse anesthetist, working for insurance companies, things like that.
Right.
And a lot of people are looking for a more traditional Monday through Friday. They want to start families. They want to be home with their children and have more freedom. And I think the industry is going to not going to, they have to take a look at how we've historically done things,
Yeah.
how we normally schedule in 12-hour shifts,
Right.
and most of us work several days in a row,
Yeah.
to open up a little more opportunity for nurses. Glenwood's been extremely fortunate that from a turnover perspective, our numbers have been stable throughout, these past few years.
So
But
you could constantly hire. It's just that you're at a
But you can't
stable
take
point.
that for granted.
Yeah.
oh no,
No, you
Oh, no.
you have to be in front of what could be.
That's right. That's right. So we have to, continue to think about
Sure.
that and kind of where, like I said, where things are going. Hospitals, I think, in a few years are not going to look like they look today. And as we focus so much more on community health and where we should have always been focusing,
Right.
keeping people healthy and keeping them out of the hospital.
Right.
But when they do get sick and they do need us, we have everything we need to take care of.
Talk a little bit about like you said, Glenwood is my hospital, and I've heard that too. But you all are so active in the community. Talk a little bit about your philosophies toward giving back to the community in that way.
Well, I think it's extremely important for us to continue a presence. Especially after what I mentioned these past couple of years, we hit this challenging period where, and again, I could talk out for hours about how challenging it was, but the community stepped up, and every day there were 3 to 4, like I said, business owners, community leaders that were at our front door. What do you need? Let us go help. And I think that's just part of it all.
Right.
Between Glenwood and what Glenwood is back to the community. The community was there for us. We always want to be there for the community. We're the largest employer on the west side of the parish, and we represent a lot of people and want to make sure that we are always giving back to the community in the same manner that they've given us. We wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the communities who had that hospital built, the communities who's always supported it. And I think it's a duty of the hospital to always be out there and support the community however we need to.
Right.
From the universities to the schools to the chambers, any way we can.
Wow. I'm getting inspired. It's so cool, the legacy and the impact that you have in the community, the vision, and maintaining that corporate culture. We have this conversation with a lot of businesses about corporate culture and moving it forward. I just think y'all have the right mix, but I do still think it goes back to people have this perception of owning Glenwood in a different way.
What can we do as chambers to help you?
Yeah.
I will say that the chambers have already done a lot, and I would ask that it please continue to do what it's done. Recently we've had a lot of work fairs, and we've been focusing really hard on bringing people into the workforce.
Right.
And opening up doors for those that have a challenge coming into the workforce, which we can all agree the past 2 years has changed a little bit with small business issues and everything else. That is huge for us. While, our hospital employs 1,200 employees, and out of that 1,200, 600 to 700 of those are what we would call licensed professionals. They are people who have gone to college for med tech or radiology or nursing, physicians, et cetera. And the other 500 employees that we have are not traditional, college degreed workers. And most of that group of people have a hard challenge coming into, finding a way to open the door, to come into the work environment, because it's more of a trade skill, like for certified nurse anesthetist or pharmacy techs and lists like that. And the work that the chambers have done with the local colleges and community colleges and work fairs to open the doors for those people to find these opportunities has been huge.
Great.
So that work has been great. And I think it's just the continued, going back to communication, like I said, letting us know what you're hearing and what you're seeing as a challenge out there in the community and what we can do to step up and provide.
It's amazing. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
talking with us. This has been Ouachita One Table, a community partnership between the West Monroe, West Ouachita Chamber and
The Monroe Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today. And Jeremy, thank you. Amazing
Thank
story.
you both.
Yep.
You've been listening to Ouachita One Table with Christopher Kelly and Roy Heatherly. This podcast is a partnership project of the Monroe and West Monroe, West Ouachita Chambers of Commerce and was produced by Godly Works Production in the Louisiana Catalyst Podcast Studios at the Benoit Community Center.